I don't care what his ERA is in the playoffs. I don't, because the guy never really gets a chance to play in the playoffs. He really doesn't, because he's not healthy. If he stays healthy, he could be the Yankees' best option because he's a left-handed power pitcher. And he's a finesse pitcher, no question. He doesn't throw 98, 99 mile per hour fastballs. He throws 94. But he's got a tremendous slider. He can throw a changeup. He's got a four-seamer. He's got a two-seamer. He's got the ability to control the plate. That's what you want in Yankee Stadium. You got to know where you're throwing the ball. You got to know where you're pinpointing the strike zone, as Jabba always says. But I'm going to say this. For all the Yankee fans that keep talking that the Yankees don't want to spend money, the Yankees aren't going to dig deep, boy, oh boy, in about 24 hours, they put up $218 million for an 8-year contract for one of the best young lefties. And I say young because he's still fairly young at 30 years old, young lefties in baseball. So I know everybody keeps talking about Burns, adding Burns and get Burns in this rotation. For what? For what? If you look at the rotation right now, who's got a better rotation besides the Dodgers and the Yankees? Who has a better rotation? Now, Cleveland, over the last couple of years, they've had a very good bullpen. The rotation has been up and down. It's a good rotation. But when you look at stars, and I know everybody's going to say, well, Carlos Rodon, he's up and he's down. And since he's been here with the Yankees, he hasn't been good. Eventually, he's going to figure it out. And if he's not the second guy, he's the third guy. That's going to make him even better. It's less pressure on Carlos Rodon to pitch. So you look at the rotation. You got Garrett Cole. You have Max Fried. You have Carlos Rodon. And you have Clark Schmidt right there. And you have Luis Gil, who was Rookie of the Year. Now, you could put Luis Gil in the second spot, move Max Fried to the third spot, and it gives Carlos Rodon even a better position to take less pressure off of him.
Well, because if Luis is still here, if he doesn't get traded.
Well, there is rumors that Luis Gil could go. Now, I don't know what the Yankees would think. I've heard Spencer Jones' name being called in a trade as well. Now, again, the Yankees are not done. I've said this. I will say this again. You will see at least 3 more moves for the Yankees, either signings for free agents or trades. The Yankees are going to make moves. They're planning to rebuild and structure this team to compete really with the Dodgers. Now, if you look at Baltimore right now, Baltimore lost. They're going to lose Burns. They're losing significant pieces. And what was really their problem last year in the second half was their pitching, was their rotation. Burns wasn't the same pitcher he was in the first half. And everything started to collapse for the Orioles because they couldn't hit in precious times of those games. If you look at the Yankees right now, and Aaron Judge needs to figure out what's going on in the playoffs. I don't know what's going on with him figuring out how to swing a ball as he's dominated in the regular season, but can't find a way to dominate in the playoffs. But if Aaron Judge can figure out what's going on in the playoffs, and they have a rotation that can compete with all the top-end rotations, not only in the National League, in the American League, but in the National League, who's going to compete with them? Who? And that's where I believe this is the most important thing. Jabba, we talk about this off air all the time. What is the most important part when it comes to the playoffs? Pitching, right? That's what we say. If you have great pitching, dominant pitching, if you can keep teams down to 1 or 2 runs, you're probably going to win. You're probably. And Garrett Cole, he pitched well in the playoffs last year. He really did. But he was the only one that was pitching well in the playoffs last year. I would say Clark Schmidt did too. I'm not going to say that Clark didn't really have very good playoff starts. He did. But everybody else, I mean, they were up and down. Luis Gil only pitched once. Carlos Rodon was up and down. You need guys. You need consistency. And the Yankees went with the first strike. They went for the first home run, and that was going after a star left-handed pitcher.
I didn't think it was obviously going to be 8 years, but when you break it down, it really makes sense because it brings your AAV down. And it gives you a little bit more opportunity to try and spend a little bit more to get some other guys. And I've been going back and forth with everybody, and it's kind of, if you're going to make a trade, it's what are you going to give up? What do they need? What are you willing to give away? And we have some pieces of the puzzle, and obviously they're all prospects. I consider Dominguez a prospect still. I still do, because he hasn't proven it enough to be able to be a legitimate guy. And so when it comes down to that, it's there's some names, there's some guys that I think can really, really help. But it's also, are we winning now or are we winning later? And I think that's a conversation that I always like to have in the understanding of, hey, if we're gonna win, we're gonna win. Like we may never get this chance again. Do we go all in? Do we wait to try and build? I mean, you obviously seen what some other teams have done, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But from the Freed side, I think it had to be one or the other, right? It either had to be Burns, or it had to be Freed. And obviously, everybody talks about Freed and in the postseason and things like that. But you also look at Corbin Burns, and yes, his ERA is better. He's 1-2. He's thrown 27 innings with 16 hits. He's had 25 punch outs. And so they're both not really stand out-ish to where you're like one steps above the other, right? So I think it's just one of those things where you got one or the other. And I was happy with either of them, to be perfectly honest. I just didn't know it would go to 8 years because he's born in January, so he's going to play the entire year at 31. And there's been very few people that have pitched in their late 30s, early 40s that have been dominant. So that's a part of it too, where I think about it. But I think for the value that he got it at, I think it's a great contract.
I think it's a great contract, especially 8 years. He's been in the league for 8 years. You look at his numbers, he's got fairly great numbers. 73 and 36 as a professional, pitcher in baseball. His best year, he was 17 and 6 in 2019. If you look at his ERA his ERA career wise is 3.07, but his whip is been fantastic. And his strikeouts to ball ratio is one of the best in the league. And if you look at left-handed pitchers, lefties last longer than righties in baseball. You see it. You can actually, in the future, move Freed to the bullpen if he can't really cut it as a starter anymore. You can move him as an eighth inning guy or maybe even as a closer. So, and the same thing with Carlos Rodon. Now, you'll look at Rodon and you look at a guy like Freed. Now you can split up. You go righty, lefty, lefty, righty. You could do many different things with your rotation now. You can spread it out, and that's what the Yankees want to do. They want to throw teams off. They want to put themselves in a position where they're in the driver's seat. This has been a problem for the Yankees for years. They've been top right-handed heavy over the last couple of years, even at the plate and even at the pitching lot, in the pitching situation too. And if you look at their Yankees bullpen, they need to re-up on that bullpen. Now, the Yankees are probably going to do that. I expect them to make one or two moves in the next couple of weeks. They could land one of the best closers in baseball. It looked like they weren't thinking Clay Holmes moving forward, and that's why the Mets brought him in as a starter. I never thought that the Yankees were going to bring back Clay Holmes. Never did.
Loizaga just signed, so
yeah. Well, Loizaga going to probably be a seventh or eighth inning guy. I don't.
Yeah, but to your point though, talking about like, do we truly genuinely have a 2? Like we have a 1, and everybody was saying like, oh, we need a strong 2. Well, it depends on what day you get a Rodon. Like he could be a 1, he could be a 5. Like let's just be honest. Like
he could be 6.
There's only a true 1 in this league. There's only a handful. And I think where you're able to move and shake is now you can kind of match up, and how this game has become numbers based. There's not a 1, 2, 3. It's kind of like, oh, what's the best matchup? All right, we're going to give you an extra day. You're still on 5. Rodon, you've had better numbers against the Angels than Freed has had, and you're able to mix and match. Like obviously Cole's going to just get whatever he wants to do and however he wants to do it. But then you got some options. And I hope there's no sophomore slump, because you're going to need innings, you're going to need starts, and you're going to need that. And hopefully you don't start drinking your own Kool-Aid and, rest on your laurels. So I just think it's really good in the matchup wise, where you have two solid lefties, and you got a kid coming off a great year. And I hope he wants to build on it and become even better, because he's got great stuff. His arm work easy. His delivery is repeatable, and I think it was great either way. Like, and I was thinking, even if they got Burns, you could go right, left, right. Like, so there's not necessarily like a two. It's kind of a matchup oriented thing,
There's a
depending
bunch
on
of
like,
twos.
yeah, and rather have that than a bunch of zeros.
I think they have a 1A and 1B. I mean, you can right now, if you look at the last 5 years, Fried is probably the top left-handed pitcher in baseball. If you look at the last 5 years of pitching, you can't even argue that. If you look at the numbers, the whip, the ERA, even wins to loss ratio, he has been the best left-handed pitcher in baseball in the last 5 years. I'm telling you, I'm looking at it right now. It goes
I don't disagree.
right. So if you look at it, I'm looking at two of them right now. It's Max Fried, Clayton Kershaw, and then you have relief pitchers, Josh Hader, Blake Snell, and Chris Sale. Those are the top 5 pitchers, left-handed pitchers in baseball in the last 5 seasons. So that says a lot when you've given the best left-handed pitcher in baseball, Yankee Stadium, which you need a star left-handed pitcher, less money, $27.5 million a year. When you look at guys that are making $40 million, guys that are making, like Garrett Cole, making $38 million. So, and again, Fried could be better than
you
Garrett
bring
Cole.
up those 5 lefties. 4 of them are starters, and they've all been hurt in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, you see, he creates soft contact, and he's
Yes.
been in the top 5. And I think last year he was at 92, and 99 is the best. And so that's what he's done his entire career. And that's why I think there's big value in having corner guys that, can make the plays and do the things that he does. Because he'll run it up there 96, 97 every once in a while. But he's not going to sit there. He's gonna cut it, spin it. He's going to do what he needs to do. But he creates soft contact. And that's why I think the defense is so important in getting guys in that, are on their toes. And he's going to make you be on your toes. So I'm interested to see too kind of the moves they make on the corners and where they go with that. Like, I'm just waiting for the next move.